Let's go for it!
Hey everybody, it's me, your buddy Dave here, the host at The Dark Stuff, and I'm back with my first new video of 2018. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm going to do the vinyl tag 2018. But before I get to it, let me just do a brief rest in peace to Fast Eddie Clarke. You know, original lead guitar player for Motorhead. Then he went on to form this band, Fastway. I care much more about Motorhead than I do Fastway. I thought Fastway was largely mediocre, but Fast Eddie Clarke was a big fucking deal, and it's really sad that he passed away. And that means all three of the original Motorhead guys, Lemmy, Filthy Animal Taylor, Filthy Animal, and now Fast Eddie Clarke, are all gone. So just like all four original Ramones, none of those guys are still around. That's basically the sad part. That's all I wanted to say. So moving on. So last year I did the Vinyl Tag 2017, and I re-watched it recently, and I understood. Look, it wasn't one of my better videos. I was kind of shitty in it, and I thought all the questions were stupid, and I had kind of a bad attitude, and I sort of badmouthed the whole thing while I was doing the video, and it got some thumbs down, and deservedly so, I suppose, because I was a little bit of a shit on it. I still stand by my belief that those questions were stupid, and they were designed for people who just got into collecting like last year. And there's nothing wrong with getting into collecting last year, but for someone who's older like me, who vinyl was my original format growing up, and it still is now, I didn't feel like I could relate. So I'm going to try not to be as shitty in this new video. I'm only going to say I'm going to try. I'm not going to promise I'm not going to complain about any of the questions, because frankly, complaining is sort of in my nature. Question number one is the first vinyl community channel that you ever watched on YouTube, and that's an easy one. I've answered that in other videos before. That's Derek Higgins. I know Derek in person because we live in the same city, but I didn't know him at the time, and it was the day after, maybe the day Lou Reed died or a day or two after. And I was Googling, I was looking for a Velvet Underground documentary that I had seen a long time ago, and I was hoping it was on YouTube, and one of the suggested videos was this video by Derek talking about how he didn't like the Velvet Underground. I was kind of intrigued by that, so I clicked on it. Derek kind of looked familiar, but I wasn't sure. And I watched it, and then I started watching some of his videos, and he kept referencing the VC, and then there you go. So, and here we are. Over 4 years later. Number two, favorite record discovered through the vinyl community. Well, this is a tough one. I can't really pinpoint any one record that like I saw someone in a video show and then I specifically went out and bought. I'm not saying it's never happened, but I couldn't really recall any specific record. I mean, I take people's recommendations, but sometimes it's sort of like maybe a while later I end up checking out a band. It's not like I saw someone's video, I went online and tried to order the record. It's just more like maybe a few months later I was like, oh yeah, I think so-and-so was talking about this. But what I will say is, through watching VC videos, I have sort of reignited a bit of an interest. I won't say a passion, but I'll say an interest in some older heavy metal. Now, I was a metal kid growing up in the 80s. I was born in 71, so about 83, 84, when I really started getting into heavy metal, it was the era of Motley Crue and Rat, Ozzy and Scorpions and, all those kinds of bands. And I loved all that shit. But I have to say, I moved on from metal by about 88, 89, and I'm into the kind of the college rock, indie rock, alternative music that I've been into pretty much ever since. But watching all these VC videos of people talking about like all these old new wave of British heavy metal bands and all this stuff from the 70s that I was either aware of, but I didn't really know that much. So as far as new wave of British heavy metal, most of those were just names in a magazine that I'd never really read. So to represent that stuff, I'll say I picked up a Saxon record. denim and leather. And that's, again, I can't point to any one specific video, but it was sort of like I would see all these videos on all these older heavy metal stuff from like the 70s into the early 80s and groups I'd never really checked out. So I would say Saxon is one. I would say also seeing all these people's videos, I always had like a slight interest in Ritchie Blackmore. I was never a huge fan growing up. I remember the Rainbow, the MTV era Rainbow, the Joe Lynn Turner era Rainbow, and I would see that and look at Ritchie Blackmore and think like, why am I supposed to be so impressed with this guy? Like, there's barely any guitar going on. This is a pop song. And then some guy goes a little bit, and then like that's supposed to, like I didn't get it, okay? So I was never really a Rainbow or Deep Purple fan, even in my metal years. But I have to say, over the course of my VC time, I've now become a big Deep Purple fan. Here's my copy of Perfect Strangers, their sort of comeback album with Ritchie Blackmore. And then that Ritchie Blackmore thing translated into me getting a bunch of Rainbow records. And even the Joe Lynn Turner stuff, which is probably their weaker stuff. I mean, the Dio stuff is the best, for sure. But it got me really into that, and I really was almost completely unfamiliar with that Dio era Rainbow, except for like Man on the Silver Mountain, which I knew. But Dio used to play that sometimes himself, so at least I think he did. Anyways, and then the last one I'll show as an example is I was an 80s kid, like I said, and I used to like the Scorpions, but I only knew the Scorpions from like Blackout onward. The pop years, with their big years, the Big City Nights and all of that. But I started going back and getting some of the older stuff after watching a lot of Vinyl Community videos of people talking about it. So there's one. There's a Best of Scorpions, Volume 1. This is the Uli John Roth period. Best of Scorpions, number 2. And going up all the way up through Animal Magnetism. And this is really Scorpion stuff that I hadn't heard prior. I was only like in the Rocky Like a Hurricane era, and I've enjoyed going back. So I would say, I can't point a specific record, but that's an area of interest that was sparked by watching people in the vinyl community. I can't really think of anyone off the top of my head specifically. Maybe Scott Waters is one, but there's some others that I just that are really into that stuff, and I kind of got inspired that way. Number 3, what are your other hobbies? I honestly don't have any. I mean, I work all the time, and my hobby is listening to music. So as far as like other hobbies, I mean, I don't really have any, I would say. I mean, I am really into movies and TV and stuff, but I don't know if that's like a hobby. That'd be pretty sad if it was, but I mean, maybe that's my answer. Okay, number 4, why did you start collecting? I don't know. I mean, music has been a thing for me since I was like 7 or 8 years old, and it was the way you acquire music. So I just bought it and I kept it. I never got rid of records until I was in my 30s when I had to do a purge, but basically that's why I started collecting. It was the only way that I could hear music that I liked when I wanted it, on demand. There was no internet back when I was a kid. If you wanted to hear something on demand, you could try calling a radio station and requesting a song and seeing if they play it within the next 2 hours or whatever. Or you could just own the record, and then so that's really it. That's why I started collecting. Number 5, do you play any musical instruments? A little guitar, but pretty badly. I used to take lessons when I was a little kid up through probably 7th or 8th grade, and then I had an electric guitar. I had a little red mini Marshall stack, and I had like a white guitar that was like a Kramer knockoff, because it's like Eddie Van Halen had that white guitar that he used to put, that white Kramer that he used to sell in the 80s, and so I had something like that, and I had an acoustic at one point. And I never really played seriously in any kind of band or anything. I just played, alone, because I always never had any confidence to play with other people. And I haven't had a guitar personally for 20 some odd years. I wanted to get one, and I've suggested like maybe I should, go out and buy a guitar and an amp and stuff. And then I was going to buy one of those St. Vincent guitars. She has her own signature model. But those fucking things are expensive. They're like a couple $1,000s, so I'm not getting that. Sorry. Number 6, have you ever worked in a record store? Yes. Twice. Same chain. It was when I was in Wisconsin. They had a Wisconsin statewide chain called the Exclusive Company. It still exists, but this was in Madison, and the Madison stores don't exist anymore, unfortunately. At least this is what I heard, and I'm pretty sure that's right. They had a really infamous downtown store that was 2 levels, and it was huge. And I worked at that one later, but initially, when I was 20, I was a college student at the UW-Madison, and I heard about, used to go to Exclusive Company almost every day because they had really, really cheap. See, they were cheaper than anyone in the world. They were selling new releases for like $10.99, and everyone else was selling them for like $16.99. It was ridiculous. Plus, they gave you a discount if you paid cash. You know, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. And so I used to go there all the time, and they had a sign looking for new applicants. And there was a woman that worked there that I didn't know her, but I knew enough, like seeing what t-shirt she wore, like what kind of music she liked, and I knew she liked Firehose. So I filled out an application, and they called and asked me to come in for an interview, and it was with that woman. She was the assistant manager downtown. They were making her manager at the new store, so I purposely wore like a Firehose shirt to the interview, because in a record store, shit, I mean, you could actually show up in a concert t-shirt, and that was like considered acceptable. And so I did that, kind of thinking, well, this is going to be my in, you know, and it worked. You know, all throughout high school, I tried to get a job with the local chain in Omaha called Homer's, and I could never get in. I was told one time I was like the second choice, but you know, so I could never get hired. And I really wanted to work in a record store because it was a very coveted thing. So I got my job there at the Exclusive Company because I wore my Firehose shirt. Then I moved to Seattle for a couple years. When I came back to Wisconsin to start my record label, I worked part-time at the Exclusive Company downtown, which that same woman who had hired me before was now the manager downtown. Only she quit shortly thereafter, and they brought in this other dude, and that guy was okay, but I mean, it wasn't the same when that guy came in. It just wasn't as fun, you know, in all candor.
You're old.
Number 7, favorite album from the year you were born. I had to kind of look it up. I wasn't really, you know, that sure, but I guess I would say it'd maybe be a tie between The Who, Who's Next, which is awesome, one of my favorite records, or maybe like T-Rex, Electric Warrior, also one of my favorite records. None of them was I listening to in 1971 when I was born, so. Number 8, what classic record have you never heard? Van Morrison, Moondance. Never heard it. I've heard that song, Moondance. Never heard the album. I've really hardly heard any Van Morrison. I've never really wanted to. Not opposed to it. Someone feels like sending me a free Van Morrison record, I'm okay with it. But you know what? I've gone to record stores wanting to spend money and really struggling to find something, and I've still never been prompted to pick up Van Morrison Moondance, which is probably all over the place. So that would be my answer for that one. Number 9, show a guilty pleasure record. I have to say that I don't really think there is such a thing necessarily. I mean, if you like it, you should own up to it. You shouldn't have to feel guilty about it. But on the other hand, I do kind of understand liking a band that you're not maybe super happy about that you like. And for me, I would say that guilty pleasure is maybe 1970s Journey. Okay? Now, once they get to like Escape in 1981, they're total shit, and I have zero interest in them. But so this is really the last good record, Captured Live, which I do actually really like. So it's like when Greg Raleigh was still in the band, I feel like they had something. I mean, whatever. I fucking like this stuff. I mean, Too Late is good. Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin'. Just the Same Way. Do You Recall? I mean, and then this live album. This is it's just good, classic 70s style rock and roll. And see, I'm already feeling guilty about it. I shouldn't. But I know Journey is like not exactly one of the coolest bands, and I'm okay with it. But I do only like the stuff from the 70s. Okay, I'm not going to ever cop to that Faithfully shit because I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now. Power ballads are just the death of every good band from the 70s, because once they got into the 80s, they just were forced to do that. These opinions brought to you solely by me do not represent the sponsor of this video. Number 10, strangest record that you have? I don't know, this one's pretty strange. Viper Mad Blues. It's all songs from the 1930s about weed and about taking drugs and stuff. And it's pretty weird. I mean, I'll say that. That's my response. There you go. Viper Mad Blues with the little naked cartoons on that. Hope nobody's offended by that. I mean, if you are, you're such a fucking baby. But anyways, side note. Number 11, show a picture disc. Super Suckers. I didn't buy this because picture discs are totally stupid and worthless. They all sound like shit, and I mean, if you're just obsessively, if you collect everything by somebody, then fine. But in this case, I got it sent as a promo from the Super Suckers. I interviewed them in support of this tour. This is Get It Together, probably 2008 maybe. So I interviewed them, and they sent me an autographed CD and a picture disc. Best posthumous release on vinyl. That was really hard. I couldn't really, I had to struggle to kind of find it. I had more on CD, but this question was specifically vinyl. So I'll go with this. This is Alex Chilton, Electricity by Candlelight. This is actually a live recording from 1997 in New York City. And I've shown this record before, but basically power went out in the, either on the block or in the venue or whatever, some sort. And so Alex Chilton just came out and played with an acoustic guitar and no microphone, and somebody just happened to have a tape recorder. And this came out in 2013. And obviously Chilton died in, I think, 2011. So this was a posthumous release. This is pretty fun, and, you know, it's not, like, obviously the greatest quality, but the fact that it was a show that, you know, only a handful of people saw, and they basically watched it by candlelight with Alex Chilton just basically serenading the crowd, that's what makes this pretty cool. Number 13, what artists do you impulsively collect? I mean, nobody really now, and I don't really impulsively collect anybody. I'm not again, I don't want to nitpick the questions. I don't want people to get pissed. But I mean, I guess there was a time when I bought anything that said Kiss on it, and there was a time that I bought everything Nirvana, you know, like I had 6 or 7 different versions of Come As You Are 12-inch, you know. I mean, it was like I just would get everything that they were about. And I don't really feel that way about anybody, not because I don't like it, but because I don't need 50 versions of the same thing anymore. I'm not that kind of collector anymore. But I do have to say, if anything comes close, I pretty much try to pick up anything the Bangles, because I've loved that band for 30 plus years, but I've never really collected them. And now I'm finding that there's all this cool stuff, like all these old 7-inches with picture sleeves and you know, magazines, and just all sorts of stuff with Bangles. So I just, that's it right now. But it's, again, impulsively, I don't know. Who am I to characterize it that way? Number 14, best blind buy. I would say that's this, Silkworm, His Absence Is a Blessing. And this is when I was living in Seattle in the early 90s, probably 93 or so. I don't know, when did this come out? It doesn't have a date on it. But I used to, I lived on First Hill in Seattle, and a buddy of mine lived in Queen Anne. It's been like 25 years I lived there. Queen Anne Hill, I think that's a hill. And so I would walk down my hill and then up his hill. Seattle's very hilly. And there was a record store on the way to my friend's house, and I would always go in there, and Tim, the bass player in this band, worked there. And I used to chit-chat with him a little bit, not a ton, but he did point out that this was his band. And I was just like, I don't know, this guy seems pretty cool. I guess I'll buy his band, you know, why not? And I fucking loved this thing. And then Silkworm never got famous or anything, but they did go on. They had simultaneously had record deals with Matador and Touch and Go in the 90s, which is unheard of, that they would both be on the two pretty much premier indie labels of the same decade, and at the same time they would just alternate releases. And then Silkworm later, the drummer, I believe, was killed in a car crash, and I knew one of the people who was in the car with him, actually, was somebody I knew from Wisconsin from back in the 90s, so it kind of tied in with there too. But this was a blind buy that turned into a band that I ended up really, really liking. Okay, 15, a blind spot artist. This one was confusing to me because does it mean an artist that everybody else likes that you just don't get, or you just never tried them, or whatever? Because that kind of ties into maybe most overrated to a certain degree, because if everybody knows it but you've decided you don't like it, maybe you feel they're kind of overrated. I guess I chose Eric Clapton because I don't give a shit about Eric Clapton. I just find him so insufferably boring. And yeah, Cream was okay, but I mean, as far as 60s blues guitar players, I just think there are so many that are more interesting. And I'm not going to bag on Clapton. I know people like him. I'm just saying I don't get it, and I guess that would be my answer for. I got a blind spot there because I just don't see it at all with Clapton. Nothing. Okay, number 16, favorite album cover. I don't know. I just sort of jumped on one real quick. This is an album from Stardeath and White Dwarfs with some pretty trippy artwork. The album is called Wastoid, and I'll open the gatefold this way. So I think that's a pretty trippy picture. I guess I don't know. Is that my favorite album cover? That's what we're saying today. Okay, so that's my answer for number 16. Okay, number 17, name a musician that you've met. Really too many to mention for me. If you notice, all of these records and almost all the posters and stuff that I have all over my bunker here are all signed, and 95% of them are all in-person signatures, so I met all of those artists. My intro to my channel is pictures of me with hanging out with various people, so I'll let those stand for themselves. I will say, in terms of if you wanted to be just a famous person, non-musician, because I saw some people answered the question that way, so maybe some people reading are getting a different set of questions. But as far as a famous person, non-musician that I've just met, would maybe be Martin Sheen, and it was in the end of 2001. I was in New York City for my cousin's wedding, and I saw him in the elevator with a bunch of people, and all these idiots were like, "Hello, Mr. President," blah, 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 you know, because he was on The West Wing at the time in 2001. And so they were being dorks and stuff, and, you know, being kind of cheesy. And that's the way I feel like when you see a celebrity, I generally don't want to say anything because I don't want to sound like a fucking idiot like those people. So I didn't see him. Next day, I'm in the elevator, and I'm riding down to the lower level, and Martin Sheen gets on, and now it's just me and him. So I'm like, ooh, holy shit, I can't just sit here like awkwardly, like pretending like I don't know him. And I do like Martin Sheen. I mean, who doesn't like Apocalypse Now? And frankly, The West Wing was a cool show. So I just decided, you know what? He has a cup of coffee there that he got from somewhere out on the street. I don't know New York City, so I'm just going to ask him about that. So I just go, hey, man, where did you get that cup of coffee? I couldn't find any place. And he starts telling me, oh, you go down 2 blocks over here, you take a left on whatever. And so we just had like a normal conversation about getting coffee. I felt like that was a better interaction than somebody being like, oh, hey, Mr. President, blah, blah, blah. Okay, number 18, show a record with sentimental value. I'm going to show this 7-inch by the X Action Figures. I released this on my own label. It's called The Great Divide. B-side is called Light Bulb, because this is the first record that I produced that sold out. And I didn't repress it or anything. It is what it is. The original, I think, 1,000 copies or whatever are all that will ever exist of this record. It's an awesome record. But so for that, because my label struggled for sales, and when something actually sold out, it was something that, you know, I tended to remember, and this one is one that sold out. And I still get people asking for it all the time. And I have 3 copies to my name, and that's it, and I'm not getting rid of those 3. Number 19, favorite album that no one else seems to know about. I don't have this on vinyl, but I wanted to use it anyway. This is a band called Flop, and this is their album Whenever You're Ready. And they came out in the late 80s, early 90s from Seattle. And they were kind of a harder-edged indie pop band. Really, really catchy songs, you know, catchy as fuck. And their debut album got reviewed in Spin, and so they got this big buzz and stuff, and it was like, you know, because Seattle, early 90s, you know, everyone was looking for the next big thing. They got signed up on this record, and they got signed to Sony Music. And the word on the street is that they gave away more free copies of this album than actually sold. I mean, the band did live up to its name. It flopped. But this is genius power pop with really, really amazing production. I don't know if it's ever been repressed, but if you ever see this used, flop whenever you're ready, and you consider yourself a power pop fan, you better throw down the $2 it's going to cost you to get this, guaranteed. And number 20, favorite album of a genre that you don't know very well. I mean, that genre would be jazz. I've been a jazz fan for 25 years, but I don't really know very much. I tend to stick to the artists that I already knew from when I was first introduced. So let's just say John Coltrane, my favorite things. And this isn't necessarily my favorite John Coltrane album. It was one that I had on vinyl. I have probably about 10 Coltrane CDs, maybe more. And then stuff like by Miles Davis. And, you know, as far as anything newer than that, I've got 3 or 4 Lounge Lizards albums, and that's about it. So I would say John Coltrane, there it is, an album from a genre that I don't know very much about. All right, that's the end of this video. Hope I didn't seem too shitty or too, like, you know, downer on the questions or whatever. Thanks a lot for watching. Take care. Bye-bye.